Hi everyone and welcome to our Canvas webinar. My name is Lauren and I'll be keeping an eye on all of your questions today during the webinar. Please feel free to enter any queries you have and we'll come back to these at the end. The webinar today will take around 30 minutes and the whole webinar will be recorded from beginning to end. So don't worry if you need to drop out during the webinar. Everyone who's registered will receive a copy of the recording to your email. Just before we get started, who are Kylo? So we are your Bullhorn experts and we have years of experience working with and providing solutions for recruiters. Our goal is to help our clients optimize Bullhorn to drive their business forward, creating time and opportunities. We do this through training, consulting, implementations, and we have more than 23 apps that are specifically built for Bullhorn. Part of our expertise also includes writing Canvas reports for our clients. Which brings me to today's webinar. So our speakers today are Raymond Penny, Kylo Director and one of our founders, myself, Lauren Miller, and I am the Marketing Manager for Kylo. And last but not least, we have Jason Jakes, who is the Principal Director of Kylo America. I will pass over to Raymond now, who will be kicking off today's session.
Thank you so very much, Lauren. And it's really great to see so many existing clients and people that we've met joining us today on the webinar, as well as people who are just new to Canvas. So today's agenda is a very simple agenda. We're going to be covering three things. I'm going to do an introduction or an overview to Bullhorn's reporting and Canvas. And then we're going to move on to our 5 ways where you can use Canvas to be more productive. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Jason, where Jason is going to introduce Kylo's Canvas Plus and illustrate some of the points that we make on those 5 ways about being productive and proactive using Canvas. So we thought we'd start by having a look at what Bullhorn themselves say about Canvas. And for us just to confirm, Canvas is a really powerful ad hoc reporting tool. It gives you the abilities to look at your business both inside and outside using all the data that is built within Bullhorn and tracked by your consultants. It really does give you the ability to leverage the deep recruitment analytics and business insights from every dimension within your Bullhorn system. Once you've got your consultants adopting Bullhorn well, the amount of information, data, and foresight that can be given by using and mining that is amazingly powerful, and the clients that we see who use it get some great rewards from it. Now, today's session, we're going to concentrate on looking at 5 things that we would look to say that you should do in Canvas based upon our experience. Now, I'm going to run through those 5 things, and then Jason is going to illustrate how we've used those in Kylo's Canvas Plus tool. Now, the first one is that, did you know that you can run reports from within a tab in a Bullhorn entity? The one we're going to show you later on is based on a company tab, but it could equally be on a candidate tab or a contact tab. So that means you can have a report on the entity in either a card or on a tab that shows you the information as you need it without having to navigate to somewhere else. That's something we think is really powerful and very, very proactive. The second thing is the use of tabs. For those who are used to getting reports, we've all adopted an Excel-like way or a Chrome tab way, where we expect information to be tabbed and in easy to use single views. So we're going to illustrate, if you haven't done that already, how you could best use those in making your reports really professional looking. The third thing, which again, for those that have been on the Canvas training, is I think in the second session, and that is once you have a report and you've drilled through to the detail of that report, you may wish just to go one step further and actually link from the detail in that report through to the Bullhorn record itself. And that takes you from Canvas to Bullhorn, opens the record, so you can actually go and investigate more of the story around that particular data item. The fourth point we're going to look at is really something that you learn as you design more reports, or you realize when you see a report where it hasn't been done. Please remove all the annoying page breaks, or set the page break limits at a level where you're not going to be interrupted to them as you try and understand the report. It's important that as you provide information back to your user base, that they're quickly and easily able to see what it is they should do with the reports, because reports are there for you to take action on, or for you to ask further questions based on the information you see. And if you get distracted by having page breaks in the wrong place, it takes away from the ability to use the report. And then our fifth and final area is really avoiding date range prompts where you can. And I think Jason's going to illustrate each of those items and also show you some others as we go through and show what Kylo have done as part of our Canvas Plus opportunity, which is a set of reports that illustrate useful reports in different areas that can be used out of the box and provided by Kylo. So with that, Jason, are you there? Take it away.
I surely am. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So Lauren and Raymond, thanks for setting the table. Appreciate that. And for everyone out there on the webinar today, what I'm about to show you are all really quick ways, essentially, to get more out of Canvas if you're a beginner or even in some cases a veteran. If you want to know more about anything I go through today, we're happy to schedule some more time to consult and talk with you about how to accomplish that yourself, or contract with you to implement any of the best practices we go through on your behalf. At Kylo, I and pretty much everyone else out there realize that Canvas can be challenging once you get into it. And what we have done is create a series of reports that Raymond talked about called Canvas Plus. They're out of the box, and they are different than any of the intelligence points that are provided with the standard reporting that Bullhorn provides. As we progress through the webinar today, we'll be showing you what Raymond just talked about and how you can be more effective and efficient with real reports that we've created in Canvas Plus. So I'm going to highlight all those things we just went through and how we've utilized those things in our reports. The hope is that you can immediately get some results by utilizing some of these items in the next report you create. So to start with, I think one of the more elegant approaches to utilizing Canvas as a tool is not just to run them from the reporting menu, but like Raymond was saying, to have them embedded within the Bullhorn application itself. So this example is showing you how you can frame them in a card. So what we've done is we've created this card called Insights by Kylo, which is essentially providing you, a bunch of spot metrics on this client. In this case, HSBC London as our #1 client ranked by value, but it has some other, meaningful metrics in here and highlights those so you don't have to go searching. It's just quick, it's easy. And another way to render these things is not just from a card, but we also created a report that runs on a tab. So in this case, it's more of a scorecard, displays a little bit more information, you have more real estate on a tab. And these reports can be run from either a card, a tab, or even if you want, you can run them from a menu action. So the idea is get these reports contextual to the entities that you need them for, so you can get clearer insights without having to go back to the Canvas reporting menu and drill through. It's just right at your fingertips. The second, and as far as actually utilizing this, it's a little, I would say it's a little complex, and it requires a bit of knowledge on coding and Cognos, which is the underlying BI tool syntax. And we're happy, this is one of those examples where we're happy to follow up with you if you want to learn more about doing this or have us embed one of these reports for you. The second example I'm going to go through is like Raymond said, to make the data behave more like an Excel workbook. And we're going to use our placement report as an example of how this would happen. So you can see when you run our placement report, we have a tab for margin projection, specifically broken out by perm placements and contract and temp placements. This allows you to jam-pack more information into one report and not overwhelm people within just one screen. So if I go to contract placement, you can see I can immediately see different data and really different organization of data in this case. So what's happening this week, this month, start +1, +2, as opposed to just overall margin projection broken out by department. Now, to accomplish this, I'm going to go in, and this is where we're going to start showing you how to accomplish these things. I'm going to go into my Canvas menu and go into the placement report, modify the report. And to make this change to have these things appear as tabs, it's actually quite simple. But most people, when they're navigating through and creating reports, they're using these menu or these ribbons up here, these edit ribbons, and you're adding things in and manipulating the filters and the sorting and things like that through this. And oftentimes people forget about what's up here in the menu. In this case, we're just going to go to report properties, and all we need to do to make, if you have multiple pages, to make them appear as tabs, you just need to change this from no, which is the default, to top left or bottom left. And that will make your report more functional if you create multiple pages within this report. Then they will all appear at the top. So pretty easy and pretty powerful.
Really easy, almost the sort of thing I could do myself. Thanks, Jason.
Yep. The next thing we're going to talk about, I'm just going to close out of this report. The next thing we're going to talk about is, making life easier, and that is running a report. So we're going to use our client efficiency report as an example here. This is a report that a lot of people really like and doesn't really exist in Bullhorn, which is weighing the activity that you're spending with an account against the gross margin. And you can see in this case, HSBC London, we have a lot of activity and we have a lot of revenue. So it's a good balance. And this is test data in our demonstration database, so take it with a grain of salt, not necessarily real world. But if you look at Telstra, we can see the activity is a lot lower than the gross margin we're getting. So we know we're being really efficient. And if the activity was way out of whack, you'd know that you probably need to investigate to see what's going on there, to see if you, A, can become more efficient, or if it's an internal or external cause for that. So you don't want to burn a ton of resources, only get a little bit of revenue unless it's a brand new account you're trying to break into. But as far as the links go, you can see down here that we have all of these hyperlinked. And so if I click on them, if I click on Google, what it's going to do is it's going to take me right back into Bullhorn and navigate into that record, which makes, like Raymond said, life a lot easier. So someone doesn't need to go into FastFind, search for it. It just navigates directly into this view for us, so we can get some further metrics or further investigation of what's going on. Now, as far as how that's accomplished, this, I would say is a bit more complex than you might expect. You would just hope that you can go ahead and, turn on hyperlinks and it just works, but not necessarily the case. So I'm going to show you how to construct those. And, I think it's one of those things that sometimes is covered in training, but people oftentimes forget or don't utilize it because it's a, little bit of a hassle to put in place. So the first thing that you have to do, you see here we have some in this list view where we've created this hyperlink. You see there's some HTML items. So essentially we need to manually construct that link in the report. And I can do that by unlocking this so I can actually access what's in this cell and manipulate a deeper level than you can when it's locked. And then I need to insert 4 HTML items to basically go around the name that's going to become the link. It was there. And we're going to provide you a link to this webinar after the case. So I'm just going to double click on each of these and kind of highlight so you can go back and see what's going on. But right now, this first one is the longest link. And I'm just going to scroll through from side to side so you can see it. But it's basically you're creating the hyperlink, you're creating the target, and then the reference to the navigation, and then you're identifying the client or the entity type. So the entity type here, in this case, is a client corporation. And you might be saying, well, how do I know what to put in there? Well, if you go to the documentation that Bullhorn provides for their APIs, you can come in here and see the entity types and see the name here that Bullhorn uses. And that is the name that needs to go back into this HTML item. So you put that right here. And then the next block here is actually the ID that it's going to navigate to. So you're going to create an HTML item, and rather than the default, which is text, you're going to change that to a data item value and link that to the actual ID of that entity. And then the last two are quite easy. The last two are just closing the brackets there for the link. And then the last one is actually closing the link itself after you have the name. So not extremely complex, but it's a little cumbersome to go through. So I just wanted to walk through that so you now have that syntax if you weren't using it before. And for the last couple items, which really in my mind fall into the best practices, we're going to highlight our everything report. So this one is a great report because it just, for your instance, it can be installed and shows you everything that's going on with, your people across the board, whether it's clients, contacts, jobs, candidates, interviews, appointments, and placements, which really are the, core of, recruitment and sales activity. But then also has one for notes. So it's a dynamically built list, and as is appointments, because we realize that everyone has their own kind of secret sauce of how they classify these things within their Bullhorn instance. So we're dynamically building these lists to display everything. And this is, in this case, in our demonstration environment, we have a lot going on. So it's a wide report. And one of the things that you want to make sure from a consumption standpoint is that you are making sure that people, like this scrolls down quite a bit too. You want to make sure that people don't get, pagination. So they get halfway through the report and they need to page down. Or if I'm exporting this to Excel or to PDF, that things don't get, cut off. So it doesn't get cut off here, and then you end up with a weird extra pages that don't even have the row headers. So I'm just going to jump into that report, the everything report, and we'll look at some of the settings that we utilize to make sure that you don't run into that. So I'm going to modify this report. And as that's loading up, what we'll see is there's a couple areas in which you're going to want to make sure you check. One, the first one is if I click these 3 dots, really highlighting the list that we're utilizing, I can come in and I can see rows per page. That's up to make sure things don't get paginated in a vertical basis. We want to make sure that we have a lot of rows being returned, so you don't. I think the default for Canvas is something like 25 or 50 rows, something very small. And then the second piece is pagination. So if I click on this pagination, there is the allow horizontal pagination. We want to take that off because we don't want that horizontal pagination to happen when we're, no matter what the format we're putting out in, we want to make sure it's always fully available. And the last setting, which is specific to PDF, which sometimes people aren't really familiar with, is if I go open to File, PDF page setup. So here you can see, because we knew that this report was going to be a big report and wide, we have the default width to be 20 inches. And that's important because if you say no horizontal pagination and the width is, a standard portrait or landscape, you're going to run into a report that's not really legible because it's going to try and cram everything in, or you're going to get some weird overflows. So it's important that you come in here and address the PDF, because a lot of times people do want to either schedule these reports, or they want to run them and put them out to the PDF.
And that's 50 centimeters for anyone in the UK or under the age of 35.
Thank you, Raymond, for the conversion. Greatly appreciated. And the next piece is, staying in line with best practices, is utilizing, and you can see in our report, we utilize a date. It's not a date range, and we utilize this in all of our reports. And the reason for this is twofold, really. I'll just highlight two of the main reasons. The first one is, if you use a date range rather than individual dates, pass through as filters to your report, then you might decide, hey, I just want to filter, some portion of the data we're putting into our report just on the end date or the to date. And when you have date range, that's fairly problematic. So it's a lot easier, just from the get-go, if you're putting in a filter based on dates, that you start with this. Otherwise, you might get halfway through your report and then realize, I actually need to just run this piece of data off of one date and not do it off a range. The second aspect is, you've seen our reports, all of them are drill through. And when you are dealing with drill through, one of the things that Cognos, the tool underneath Canvas, sometimes has problems with is, understanding the formats of dates. And when you pass it through from one report to another as a range, sometimes the data types themselves get confused, and you're going to run into weird errors, and you're going to have to do a lot of casting and manipulation, and it's just a big old headache. So it's much simpler and easier to align data types if you have singular dates. So those are the two main reasons, and it's just a best practice. As you're writing reports, you should go ahead and just use dates rather than date ranges. A couple of things that Raymond didn't talk about as far as things we were going to cover. I think that another item I would put in as just a quick, I'm just going to put in everything summary, put this in here. If you have I'm just going to put in a quick table. So if you put in a table somewhere, it's easy to put it in, but say I wanted to add another row to this, it's not immediately intuitive to be like, oh, I just want to add more columns or more rows, because this will actually insert a whole nother table. So if you want to add more, just remember, come up to the table menu and then insert columns to the left, columns to the right, or rows above and rows below. Because that's something that, at least myself, when I was initially playing around with tables, that was an issue for me. And really, tables are one of the best ways to make sure that you're able to format your report in the way in which you want. Because if you're looking at the sectioning piece of Canvas, you're limited to some very basic sections. So usually, in any sort of complex report, you need to use tables to get things to appear where you want them. And I guess the last thing I'll leave you with as far as best practices is Dr. Google. I can't, in my trainings that I've done in the past, I can't tell people enough that Google is a fantastic resource for going ahead and getting more knowledge. And since, in the left place here, since Canvas is really Cognos, I'm going to just say CAS as a type, which I can't, but luckily I've typed it in the past. I'm just going to say Cognos cast stringed integer. Because sometimes when, in this example I'm pulling up, is purely around trying to match data types. So I realize that many of you on here will have utilized custom fields, and maybe you have a piece of data in a string or in a text column that needs to be casted as an integer or converted to an integer, so you can match it to another integer field, because you can't necessarily, just match a string to an integer in Cognos. So just remember that Dr. Google is one of your best resources, and there's a lot of information out there because the Cognos tool itself has been out in the marketplace for probably like 10, 15 years. It's just been out there forever. So there's tons of data here, whether it's in videos or articles. So by all means, use that if you're struggling with anything in Canvas. And since I have a couple minutes left before we go to Q&A, I just wanted to highlight a couple more items from our Canvas Plus suite. I think these are, I'm going to highlight the data quality report and the reverse marketing map report. I think both of these are fairly, fairly powerful when it comes to what does this really do for us, in addition to what Bullhorn does out of the box. So in this case, I've run the data quality report, which is nice because what it does is it actually will categorize, potential errors within your system, by candidate, job, placement, or, interviews. And certainly one of the questions that I'm sure will come up at the end is, if we see a report that we like that you've pre-built, can you edit that, as you install it for us? And the answer is of course we can do that. So, if this report looks like it might be useful to your company, but you say, hey, we have a critical problem with this one error that's not mentioned here, can you dump that into this report before you install it? Sure, absolutely. But it's a nice visual representation of what's going on. And if I wanted to see, in this case, jobs with start end date errors, aka the end dates before the start date or something akin to that, you can immediately drill down and drill through that. So that's a nice one. And the last one I'll highlight before we go to questions, just close out a couple of these. And just going to go back into my Canvas Plus. And run this report so I can get back to the menu. What I am going to run is the reverse marketing report. And I'm not sure why it's not running for me. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to log out, log back in. And while I do that, I'll just, kind of go through my conclusion as well. But, hopefully what we've shown you today, or what I've shown you today with the demonstration, will let you create more dynamic reports for you and your end users. And maybe we piqued your interest a little in some of the reports we've already created, and they're ready to be deployed to your instance if you want them. If you want to know more about any of our reports, we'll be including a link to the overview of them when we pass along the recording of this webinar, and we're happy to have any conversations about anything we can help you with, whether that is a custom report that you're looking to get built, or whether it's leveraging some of these new items I went through, or whether that's really around utilizing any of our pre-built reports. I'm just going to give it one more whirl real quick to go into Canvas and highlight that one report before I pass it off. And for some reason, it looks like Bullhorn's going to, oh, I was going to say it's going to fight me a little bit, but here we go, reverse marketing. And I am going to run this. The idea of the reverse marketing report, just for context, is it actually utilizes maps. So the idea is you have a candidate that calls in, and you want to have a quick, dynamic conversation about, and I'm actually going to use maps, and oh, I'm just having a tough time with my scrolling today. But I can get back over to UK. I'm going to scroll into London. So let's say this candidate we're speaking with is in London, and they're located somewhere in the vicinity of central London. And we can very quickly, have a report like this that shows us where companies are that either have had jobs in the past or currently have open jobs. So we can be right on the phone with them and say, hey, and we can filter this based on the types of jobs as well. So all these pins pop up. We can immediately see that Canada Recruitment has these jobs either open or closed. We can immediately see that Bullhorn has some openings. And we can, if there's something here that piques their interest as we're talking to them, we can click on this and it will drill through into that report so you can have a more educated conversation. But it's really a nice graphical representation because, candidates are going to want to know, A, how far away this place is, what the opportunities are, and it leads for a dynamic conversation. This is something you can't accomplish. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Lauren. And thanks everyone for listening today. And hopefully we'll be speaking with some of you in the near future.
Great, thank you, Jason. So we have a little bit of time left for some questions. First question I have is around scheduling reports. Jason and Raymond, do you have any advice on scheduling reports?
I think the answer is yes, you should, but you need to design them with scheduling in mind and have any report that has the requirement to populate fields before you hit run won't schedule. So you need to think about the design of the report before it's done. But a great idea, we've seen it work really well. Jason, I'm not sure if you've got any color to add to scheduling reports.
No, I think you covered it, is that you need to design with that in mind because the way the Bullhorn scheduler works is it won't accept any reports that require arguments. So you just have to hard code those in there. And sometimes people say, hey, well, I want a report for each of my departments to go out to specific people. Well, the good news is you can hard code those departments in, and then you can choose the people within that department. You can choose a department to be the distribution list of the report or individual users. So you can really a la carte a lot of options when you're scheduling.
Yeah, no, so I think the answer is yes, you should schedule, and it's a great feature. Just design reports that are there to be scheduled. Good question. Any others, Lauren?
Yeah, so next one is editing Canvas Plus reports. Are users able to edit Canvas Plus reports on their own, or do you being Kylo, have to make all of the edits?
There's really a choice. What we've done is design the reports such that they can be used by either the read-only version of Canvas, or if you've got full Canvas, then they're there for you to edit, or a combination of if you would like changes to be made to the reports before you start to use them, we can also offer that we make some changes as part of a paid assignment to make the changes. So all options are there. We would say if you're going to edit the reports, please take a copy. It's always good to have a safe copy to go back to. But we see these reports as really a quick start to a good result that gets over the pain of starting from a blank canvas. No pun intended. I think that's another good question. We got any last questions? I see that we've probably gone we're just coming up to about the schedule we said. Is there any last questions in there, Lauren?
Yeah, I have a couple more, so we'll do one more if that's okay. And it is, can you pull data into Canvas from other sources? So as an example, can you pull in back office data such as financials from OneStaff or Great Plains?
Well, that's probably a question for Jason. He probably sees more of the OneStaff and Great Plains scenarios.
So the answer is yes, absolutely. But the architecture of that is such that it doesn't, you can't have Canvas go directly to another database to pull data in. So when working with OneStaff or really any other financial tool out there, besides the Bullhorn middle office products, what we usually do is set up a flow of data from that database into custom objects within Bullhorn. So typically there's going to be possibly payroll data in a custom object on the candidate record. There will be invoice data that lives on the client record in a custom object there. And because Bullhorn has done such a nice job with Canvas, as far as how it just works with custom fields and custom objects, as soon as you configure that to be part of your system, it automatically appears in Canvas for you to write reports on, and it respects what you've labeled things, so it's very intuitive. So the answer is yes, you can report on those things. In the case of OneStaff, that's something that they've actually done a number of times, is set up that flow. So they actually construct the flow of that data into Bullhorn, and we just coordinate it and create a custom object to catch that. So if you want to have a deeper conversation on that in the future, I'm happy to do so and coordinate with OneStaff on that.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up to our target time of just before 22 in whichever country you're in. So I think that's probably enough questions. Lauren, over to you.
Thank you, Raymond. So we do have some outstanding questions, and I apologize if we weren't able to get to your query during the call, but we will follow up with you directly. As a reminder, we'll also be sharing the full recording of this webinar as well, and that should be with you most likely tomorrow. Final words would be thank you to Raymond and Jason and everyone who's attended. To echo what Jason said earlier, if you do have any further questions, you can contact Raymond at raymond.penny@kailoupartners.com or jason.jakes@kailoupartners.com. And you can also find out more about Canvas on our website at the address shown on the screen, which is kailoupartners.com/canvas. And on that note, I will finish things up. So thank you again, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.